Part 15. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 141. When the two saw Qin Xian's appearance, they quickly stopped talking, leaned over and cupped their hands and said, "See Master, Sect Leader." Qin Xian nodded and helped the two of them up. Then, he looked at Lin Tian and said, "What Xueling just said is right, this is indeed the Central Territory." Before Lin Tian could say anything, Qin Xian said again, "So from today on, you can't be left behind. I'm going to name you the Protector Elder of Profound Heaven Section. With your help, I will lead the name of Profound Heaven Sect to be resounding throughout the world, be the Profound Heaven continent, and he ascends you above the heavens of the myriad worlds." When Lin Tian heard this, his body couldn't help but trembled. He did not refuse or accept, and said, "Master, I naturally understand what you mean but it may take tens of thousands of years to reach that kind of strength. Precipitation, so my disciple feels that there is no need to be so anxious. One day, I, Profound Heaven Sect, will reach that state." Speaking of this, Lin Tian seemed to remember something again, looked at Qin Xian and said doubtfully, "But Master, I seem to remember that our sect does not have power spread in the Central Territory. I think we should establish good relations with other entities first. Finally, find a way to develop, otherwise it may." Lin Tian glanced at Qin Xian secretly and said no more. When Lin Tian finished speaking, Qin Xian gave him a hard knock on the head. While knocking, he said, "You boy, do you know what you are saying? I think you are afraid that you will stay with Xueling every day. We are all so lost together that we don't even know what happened to our sect recently. Even if you don't know, then don't let anyone say that I, Profound Heaven Sect, am inferior to others. Isn't this because I am trying to embolden others and destroy my own prestige? I think you deserve a beating." Lin Tian waited for Qin Xian to finish the beating and then touched his aching head. He quickly waved his hand and replied, "Master, aren't you here? That's why I didn't care about anything else." Lin Tian woken is a little aggrieved. Seeing this, Qin Xian glanced at him helplessly and said, "Forget it, I don't want to blame you if you don't know, but I'm going to train you from now on. I will make you the elder protecting the section. You don't need to accept other position transfers. You only need to obey my orders." When Lin Tian heard this, he did not refuse and nodded in agreement, "I will obey Master's orders." When Xueling, who was sitting next to him, saw this scene, she covered her mouth and snickered. Her smile was so beautiful. Qin Xian glanced at her, said nothing, and said to the two of them with a serious face, "There is one more thing I forgot to tell you, and that is that we don't know the situation near the Central Territory when our sect just came, so it's up to you to send someone to check if there are any powerful sects or families nearby." Hearing this, Lin Tian patted his chest and said, "Leave it to me, Master." Afterwards, Qin Xian gave the two of them a few more instructions, and without saying anything else, Lin Tian took Xueling's little hand and walked towards the Deacon Hall in the sect. The Deacon Hall is the place where the elders are gathered in the Profound Heaven Sect. Whenever there is anything that needs to be investigated or something important that needs to be dealt with, I will go here. For example, what kind of trouble did the disciple encounter? Seeing the two people leaving, Qin Xian's eyes flashed slightly and he couldn't help but look at the sky in the distance. The sky is very blue, as clear as a transparent mirror. The white clouds hang like cotton between the sky and the earth, and the birds, swallows and cranes flying by from time to time make the scene a beautiful picture. There is no pollution here, just the smell of nature. Then, Qin Xian turned around. He is also preparing to train his own apprentices. Lin Tian is the first one, and later there will be two brothers, Shangguan Xianfeng and Qingxian Qingfeng. Speaking of Shangguan Fengfeng, Qin Xian seemed to think of something. "This girl, I haven't seen him for a long time. I don't know what he is thinking about every day. I haven't seen him come out for a long time, Qin Xian murmured. However, Qin Xian was too lazy to go find her. He still had to explain various matters within the section. He had no time to care about the relationship between master and disciple, and the first thing was to recruit disciples. Thinking of this, Qin Xian's figure turned into a trace of smoke, disappeared on the spot, and appeared in Tianqian Hall. A mysterious golden token appeared in Qin Xian's hand, with the big character Xian written on it. I saw Qin Xian's mouth slightly opened, and words were passed into the Xian golden token. The next moment, the elder peak masters who owned this token stopped handling their own affairs, called their disciples, and quickly rushed to Tianqian Hall after giving instructions. I saw only the Tianqian Hall. Dozens of figures with powerful auras appeared here. They were wearing robes of various colors, including men, women, old, and young. Everyone's expressions showed a hint of respect. They stood on both sides of the hall and bowed their hands to Qin Xian, who was at the head of the hall. "See you, sect leader." The voice was loud and resounded throughout the entire hall. Qin Xian nodded slightly. "Get up." Yes, seeing this, everyone stood up quickly and looked at Qin Xian as if he was waiting for the next instruction. Looking at everyone's expressions, Qin Xian said, "I believe you have all seen what just happened, right?" Everyone looked at each other and nodded to show that they saw it. Seeing this, Qin Xian waved his hand, and saw a mirror image appearing in front of him. The shadow above was the current Profound Heaven sect. Looking at the crowd, he said, "Look, Profound Heaven sect is not located in Tianyuan Mountain now, but is located somewhere in the Central Territory. This place was originally called Seven Sacred Peaks, but now due to our arrival, its name was changed to Profound Heaven sect, and these 7 peaks also became the residence of other peak owners." Everyone nodded. Looking at the expressions of everyone, Qin Xian said again, "When I got here, I decided to recruit disciples, so when the recruitment of disciples starts, you can make your own decisions, such as recruiting disciples or something. There is also the news that Profound Heaven sect won its first victory in the 5-domain competition. I believe you have heard about it, right?" Everyone nodded. "It's a long story, so I won't tell you all in detail. I'll explain it simply and clearly. Our sect participated in the 5 Realms competition and won a few games for the first time. This gave us the opportunity to enter the Tianqian Secret Realm. The disciples who entered the Tianqian Secret Realm almost defeated the Tiangong disciples before and because of some things. Let our sect fight with their Tiangong warriors." Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 142. Although it's not very serious, it has offended Tiangong. I believe you all know what kind of force Tiangong is. It is the overlord of the entire Profound Heaven continent. Bloodthirst overcame their Tiangong disciples, and their faces were completely destroyed, leaving them without that arrogant look. But hitting them in the face naturally attracted the attention and resentment of Tiangong, so the disciples of Tiangong in Tianqian Secret Realm got together and wanted to get rid of the disciples of our sect, but unfortunately, we did not. He succeeded, but even lost his own life. It's just that I also believe that Tiangong knows, and I also know that we killed those people in Tiangong, and just recently, Tiangong took action against us. We directly used 5 strong martial emperors and countless martial arts masters, martial sovereign. Among them, martial saint and martial arts masters won countless victories, but the final result is that we won. Because I sent a strong man from the martial emperor level to the Central Territory. His name is Chuyu. His own strength is the peak of the low-level martial emperor. He directly defeated 5 people with 1 against 5, and even almost killed. All the people he brought were directly killed by Chuyu, so we won a great victory. But winning is winning, but I am also afraid that the Heavenly Palace will be angry and send the more powerful martial emperor to deal with us, so I moved the Profound Heaven sect to the central domain and moved it here. There is no other way to follow him. Fight to combat his arrogant arrogance, so I hope you will practice more diligently, otherwise the strong men from the heavenly palace will come over by then. I hope that by then, you will understand the meaning of practice. After everyone listened, some pondered and some nodded, but without exception, they all worked together to fight against Tiangong, without raising any questions or fears. Looking at everyone's expressions, Qin Xian didn't say anything more. Any more words would be nonsense. He waved his hands to everyone and said, "Okay, I don't want to say more. You can leave." Seeing this, everyone stopped talking and bowed and retreated. "Say it." "All I saw was a dark place. There is no light here, there is just boundless magic mist. The dark magic mist is like a little snake wandering around in it, like a monster." The next moment, a blood-red eye appeared in the magic mist. His bell-like eyes looked around, and then he stepped out. His own terrifying aura mixed directly with the nearby monsters, as if they were fighting. He was tall, with huge pointed teeth on both sides of his mouth. His body was like a bear, and his arms were like a tiger. The sharp claws on his hands seemed to be able to tear open the void with his bare hands. His name is Gui Yan, an ancient beast who was sealed here for unknown reasons. Originally, he thought he would live here until his death, but God gave him hope and Li Ziun released him. Li Ziun used the token to remove all the seals inside, thus freeing the ancient beast from it, and he no longer had to endure the pain of loneliness. But there is a price to pay for coming out, and the price is to eliminate the Profound Heaven sect and others who are still alive in the world one by one, leaving no one alive. When Ancient Beast first heard about this price, he naturally agreed to it happily. After all, no matter how difficult the price was, nothing was more important than him coming out. "It's time to complete the mission that woman gave me," Monster made a hoarse voice, and then the tall figure disappeared into the magic mist. Click. I saw a space crack appearing in the sky above a vast and glorious city. The deist figure in the space crack walked out. It was a powerful monster, it was Gui Yan. Gui Yan's dark black nose kept sniffing, as if he smelled something, and he raised his eyes and looked not far away. I found a few figures in black robes not far away sitting quietly on the house practicing. Seeing this scene, Gui Yan laughed. He felt the breath that Li Ziun told him among these deist figures. These figures in black robes are the disciples of the Shadow Palace. The reason why they have the aura of Bloodthirsty and others on their bodies is because they had been in contact with Bloodthirsty and the others not long ago, and it was they who brought Bloodthirsty and others back to the Shadow Palace. In the main hall, they were quite happy when they first received this task. After all, they rarely came into contact with the people above. I saw Gui Yan's tall figure appearing in front of several people today. Before they could react, a terrifying bloody nail was inserted directly into their chests until it was firmly nailed to the ground, bright red. The blood also covered the entire Jade Street at this moment. Gui Yan looked at the painful expressions on several people's faces and smiled coldly. The strength of these people is too weak for him, and they can't arouse his fighting spirit at all. I thought I could still fight against the strong ones, but now it seems that I can't meet any strong ones. Several people were also unlucky. If they had not come into contact with the bloodthirsty people, maybe they would not have died so innocently. Gui Yan actually didn't want to kill them. If it weren't for the aura they had, I wouldn't be too lazy to do anything to them. He is also a person who is afraid of trouble. Although he is very powerful, he will not attack a mysterious force without warning. He is also afraid that it will cause the powerful forces behind him to pursue him. Gui Yan is not stupid, on the contrary, he is very smart. Li Ziun gave him this task before. At that time, he had already asked everything clearly, but Li Ziun only told him half-truths and half-lies. After all, he himself did not know what the middle level of the strongest expert in Profound Heaven sect was. Several people looked weak and looked at Gui Yan who appeared in front of them, wondering why this monster would attack them. He looked like he wanted to speak, but he couldn't say anything because of the pain in his body. After half a stick of incense, several people died slowly due to excessive blood loss. Looking at the corpses of several people, Gui Yan's figure disappeared and appeared elsewhere, because he felt the breath again. I saw 3 men in black robes sitting on chairs in a dark and damp house. Looking at the expressions of the 3 people, they seemed to be talking about something. Tiangong has been silent. I don't think there is any need to monitor them anymore. I can just keep an eye on them, the man in black robe sitting at the head said lazily. See for yourselves, 7 days have passed now. Not to mention that they have not made any moves, even their disciples have not made any moves. They just stay in their own houses and practice day by day. When the 2 heard this, they didn't know what to say, and they looked slightly lost in thought. But at the next moment, Gui Yan's figure appeared in front of the 3 of them. When the 3 of them saw this scene, their faces turned pale with shock, knowing that this man must be a strong man. Before they could speak, the bodies of the 3 of them were firmly controlled by Gui Yan. Looking at the expressions of the 3 of them, Gui Yan said with disdain, "Humph, something like an ant is still trying to struggle in my hands. If you don't have the strength, it's better to die peacefully." The words have fallen. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 143. The 3 of them didn't say a word, and were just crushed into powder by Gui Yan. Looking at the ashes scattered on the ground, Gui Yan showed a hint of disdain and said coldly, "What a boring game." Then he looked outside and murmured, "I don't know if what that woman said is true. Listen to what she said, the strong martial emperor of the sect has a record of 1 against 5, or even a record of complete crushing." Gui Yan narrowed his eyes slightly, "Whether it is true or false, I still have to give it a try first to see if he is worthy of me using my full strength." The words have fallen. An extremely powerful aura attracted his attention, and he looked towards the owner of this aura. I saw a majestic-looking young man wearing a green robe appearing on a red pavilion. It exudes a dignified temperament. Sensing the powerful aura of the other party, Gui Yan showed a trace of doubt on his face and murmured, "Who is this person? Why does the aura emanating from his body make me feel an indescribable feeling?" Gui Yan frowned. Maybe this person has already reached that level. At this point, Gui Yan seemed to feel that what he said was a bit ridiculous, shook his head and said, "It's impossible. In order to reach that state, in addition to talent, you also need experience. How can you achieve it easily without tens of thousands of years of experience? If nothing else, his strength should be around the middle level of martial emperor." Looking at this man, Gui Yan did not go out immediately, but stayed quietly in the house. Half a quarter of an hour later, the man in green robe glanced around and walked over to this place. Seeing the man's figure, Gui Yan once again used his soul power to sense this man, and found that he actually had the same aura as the people he just killed. Is it possible that this person is also from that sect? After a second thought, Gui Yan's eyes couldn't help but light up, and he murmured, "Maybe this is the powerful martial emperor who has been widely spread, and can fight 1 against 5. Speaking of this, Gui Pavilion couldn't help but laugh wildly. "Ha ha ha. Look at this man's eyes with a hint of passion. I finally found you, but let me see how strong you really are." The words have fallen. Gui Yan's figure began to change, from an ugly monster to a middle-aged man with a crowned appearance, and then appeared in front of that person. Looking at the figure that appeared out of thin air, the man's face showed confusion. Before he could speak, Gui Yan immediately went up to fight with him. Boom! I saw a ray of light coming from Gui Yan's hands, and the next moment, Gui Yan then punched out. Boom! Boom! The huge sound of fists resounded between heaven and earth like thunder. The mighty momentum actually shook a hole in the sky. Even the nearby void could not withstand this attack and began to crack. The space was shattered. The city under the feet also turned into ruins because it could not withstand this mighty punch. How many people were killed or injured among them? Seeing this situation, the man's facial expression was just a hint of surprise. He was not afraid. He just didn't understand why the man wanted to attack him. But it's impossible for him to withstand this blow firmly. The words have fallen. Then he saw the power of the green-robed man's own laws constantly surging around his body, and the next moment, he saw the nearby space shattering. Click, 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 click. The laws of space began to appear one after another, and countless space chains twisted slowly. Their goals remained unchanged and they stared at Guoyan. It seemed that as long as Guoyan dared to make the next move, all the space chains would rush over like tigers and tie him up. Looking at the space chain that threatened him, Guoyan frowned. This space chain was too threatening to him. If he was not careful, he might be hit by a single blow. Then he will become a living target. This made him sigh in admiration. It's really as rumored, this place is really extraordinary. The next moment, the green-robed man raised his palm slightly, and a void and lawless space shield blocked his body. The giant fist that came at him was firmly blocked like this. Can't make any progress. Just a collision, the void that had just been restored nearby began to be unable to bear it again and collapsed. The energy of the two overflows, irrigating like spring water, and the aura of their own laws is released mercilessly as if it is free of money. When the nearby crowd noticed the fight between the two, they immediately fled from here like rabbits. He hid tens of thousands of miles away. Do they know that other battles at the martial emperor level are not something that they, the martial saint martial venerable, can watch? If they are not careful, they may be shaken out by the aura colliding between the two. Jump. I saw that the ground with a radius of hundreds of miles collapsed by 10 meters, revealing a huge cave. The man in green robe just stood below with his head bowed, and the long hair behind him was slowly fluttering under the surging breath of law. As for that giant fist, it has long since disappeared. Then, the man in green robe looked at Guoyan and asked with an indifferent expression, "Your Excellency, did I offend you in some way? Isn't it too much to attack indiscriminately like this?" Hearing the question from the man in green robe, Guoyan glanced at him disdainfully and did not reply. He asked himself, but the man didn't reply. The man in green robe looked a little helpless. He didn't want to continue fighting with this man. After all, once two powerful martial emperors fought, the more power of the law was consumed, the more dangerous his own safety would be. And was even attacked by other strong martial emperors. Seeing this person not replying to him, it also means that this person does not want to give up. Seeing this, the man in green robe no longer held back, his expression showed a trace of indifference. He rushed in front of Guoyan and fought with him again. Boom! Bang bang bang! Countless mountains shattered, the earth sank, and many innocent monsters and humans died in the battle between the two. There are many people who are scared, many who are amazed, and many who are happy. Generally speaking, these people want to see the battle between the strong martial emperors, as long as they don't hurt themselves. The blazing sun fell, and the shining moon rose. The sky was full of stars, and the earth was covered by the moonlight, illuminating the after images. A day and a night had passed since the two of them were fighting. They looked a little tired and stopped on a mountain peak. After fighting for a day and a night, even the martial emperor couldn't bear the two of them. The man in green robe looked a little pale and exuded a weak aura. In comparison, Guoyan's situation is much better than him. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 144. I saw the man in green robe taking out a round pill with a hint of natural flavor from the space ring and swallowing it in his mouth. Within a few breaths, the man in green robe began to look rosy, no longer as pale as before. Slowly exhaling a breath, he looked at Gui Yan across from him and said, "Your Excellency, you and I have been fighting for a day and a night, so we should stop. After all, under the watchful eyes of many strong men, you and I, otherwise, other martial emperors may take advantage of our weakness to attack us, which I believe you don't want to see." Hearing this, Gui Yan did not remain aloof this time. After thinking for a while, he said, "Then let's stop here." Hearing Gui Yan's reply, the green-robed man raised his eyebrows and asked him, "Let me ask you something. I shouldn't have offended you in any way, right? You and I have never even met. Why do you attack us so indiscriminately? Is it possible that you just want to find someone to vent your anger to?" The man in green robe said with a frown. At the end of the sentence, he even looked slightly angry and his voice became louder. Hearing this, Gui Yan burst into laughter. The laughter was magical, but it also contained a hint of excitement and enthusiasm. "Let me ask you, are you from Profound Heaven Sect?" Hearing the question, the green-robed man frowned, looked up at Gui Yan and said, "I'm not from Profound Heaven section, I just have a relationship with an elder in this section. Is it possible that you came here because of this matter? Are you going to fight me? Could it be that Profound Heaven Sect offended you somewhere?" Gui Yan looked at his expression, shook his head and replied, "Profound Heaven Sect, you didn't offend me in any way, I just can't understand this section. I felt the aura of the sect in you, so I sent you. Treat him as a member of their sect." Hearing this, the man in green robe frowned slightly and his voice was a little angry. "So, Your Excellency, you are not going to give up? And I will suffer the consequences of this." Gui Yan glanced at him and didn't answer, but just took care of himself to recover from his injuries. After a moment of pause, he said, "There's nothing to say. Since you have nothing to do with Profound Heaven Sect, I made a mistake. If you don't want to continue fighting, you can leave." As soon as these words came out, the man in green robe looked a little unhappy. In his eyes, both of them are strong martial emperors. "Why do I respect you so much, but you are so arrogant to me? Isn't it that you are looking down on yourself? Too high? If that's the case, then there's no need for him to endure it any longer." His expression became cold, and his voice resounded in Guiyan's ears like ice. "But I don't want to leave anymore, because your words have successfully angered me. If I don't let you shed a layer of skin today, how much dignity will I have in this world?" The words have fallen. A huge crack opened in the sky. I saw countless law auras appearing around the man in green robes, turning into black holes one after another. In the black holes was an endless nothingness that could be seen at a glance. It was so dark that nothing could be seen clearly. Seeing this situation, Gui Yan also decided not to hide anymore, and his own law aura was completely released at this moment. The two are fighting together again. Boom! Under the reflection of the moonlight, the two figures kept colliding. It's like meteors meeting together. Bang bang bang. As soon as the two collided, the mountain peak under their feet instantly turned into rubble. Even the nearby mountain peaks were not spared. Unable to withstand the breath of the two, they directly shattered and collapsed. Boom! The two figures appeared from the sky to the ground, and even on the sea, and the two began to fight. The sound of collisions continued like the sound of a piano, and wherever the two of them passed, everything meant destruction. And because of the high-intensity battle between the two of them for a day, their own law aura has begun to become a little weak. All I saw was the void. The two of them stood with their feet in the air, both of them looked tired and weak, their lips turned white, and they gasped from time to time. Hoo-hoo! Gui Yan gritted his teeth and glanced at the man in green robe with difficulty. Then he sat cross-legged and slowly restored his lost power of law. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes, looked at the man in green robe and said, "What's your name?" I fought very hard today. I haven't felt this way for tens of thousands of years. Today you let me. I felt this long lost aura, so I decided to make you my friend. Hearing this, the man in green robe smiled, and the relationship between the two relaxed a little. My name is Gao Kang, and I am honored to have you as my friend. Afterwards, the two slowly recovered from their injuries. After recovering, they talked all night. They talked for several days before they stopped. Say it. All I saw was a cold and dark hall. 8 black pillars reaching into the sky reached into the sky, and a blood-red carpet spread on the ground. And in the center of the hall, the figure with a powerful six-path aura and an unclear face stood quietly in the hall, looking like he was talking about something. The sounds of conversation continued to echo in the empty hall, until an old voice resounded through everyone's heads. Do you feel it? Recently, from time to time in the Shadow Palace and the Soul Palace, disciples and elders die for no reason. People are sent to search for them, but no clues can be found. Hearing this, a middle-aged man nodded and said, "Of course I feel it, because I was severely criticized by the palace master and the others for this matter. I have carefully investigated and found that the person who did it is a powerful man. I dare to conclude that the strength of the person who did it is at least at the level of a half-emperor, and it is even possible in the emperor realm. Otherwise, how could there be no clue?" The man's words made everyone think for a long time. After a full quarter of an hour, someone said, "Do you mean that Tiangong has already taken action against us?" After hearing this, everyone glanced at him and fell into silence for a while. In fact, they were able to determine based on the situation that the dead disciple was caused by someone from Tiangong, because other than it, there was no mission force that would offend them. But it is a pity that Jiang does not have the ability to solve this matter, because the opponent is a strong martial emperor, and the strongest person in the second hall is only half emperor. How can he have the ability to deal with a strong martial emperor? Then, a woman's voice broke the silence. "I think we should report this matter to the people above. After all, our Soul Palace and Shadow Palace don't have the strength to deal with the people from the Heavenly Palace." Everyone looked up and saw a woman as beautiful as a celestial immortal, with icy muscles and jade bones standing there. Her black hair was straight down to her waist, and she was wearing a purple dress that showed off her proud figure. A pair of slender jade feet are exposed, making it difficult for everyone to look away. After all, this kind of woman is already stunning in their eyes. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 145. But they also know that beautiful things can only be seen once. After all, roses still have thorns, and then they immediately lowered their heads. The face of this woman is very familiar, it is Chu Yale. It is precisely because of this that several people look cautious. After all, Chu Yale's identity is the deputy palace master of the Soul Palace. She is not on the same level as them, not even in terms of strength. And they are just guardians of the law. The most indispensable thing in the Soul Palace and Shadow Palace is the Dharma Protector. "I listen to you, Palace Master," a man with a treacherous appearance and a thin body replied respectfully. Seeing this, the others understood that they should set an example, and quickly pretended to say what the Deputy Hall Master said. "We will do it." Hearing everyone's unanimous answer, a smile appeared on Chu Yale's pretty face. This smile was just like the sentence, "A smile brings beauty." Since everyone agrees, just do what I do. The second palace will not care about this matter from now on. You don't have to worry about the consequences. I will make it clear to the palace master. If the big shot above gets angry because of this, I will bear all the consequences. After everyone heard this, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. What they were most worried about was that the big shot above would get angry and involve them. Now that Chu Yale assured them, they also let go of their worries. And what I just said was because of Chu Yale's identity. After all, the people below will eventually agree with some of the words of the people above. Because it's all about strength here. If you are stronger than Chu Yale, you naturally don't need to do this. It won't even matter if you bring Chu Yale into the harem. But it is a pity that they are not as strong as Chu Yale. Afterwards, everyone casually chatted with some important words and then left. Their respective figures just disappeared into the hall. After everyone left, two powerful figures appeared in the hall out of thin air. Seeing the appearance of the two men, Chu Yale's expression immediately became respectful, and she quickly raised her hands and said, "See you two hall masters. These two people are the Shadow Demon and the Soul Demon. The two of them have been hiding in the dark, watching everyone's conversation." As if he knew what Chu Yale was going to say, the Soul Demon said in a deep voice, "Just do what you just said, and I will report this to the master. You don't have to worry about this matter. Just do your part. The master will send strong men to deal with it." Hearing this, Chu Yale nodded. Both Soul Demon and Shadow Demon knew this, but she just stated it in detail. Afterwards, Han Mo explained some important things to Chu Yale. After the explanation, he waved her back. "Say it." Chu Yale bowed her hands and stepped back with a look of respect in her eyes. Seeing Chu Yale's charming figure disappearing from the place, Soul Demon's eyes revealed a faint light. He looked at Shadow Demon aside and nodded. The latter understood the meaning after seeing this. Next moment, a space crack appeared out of thin air in front of the two of them. The two looked at each other and walked in without hesitation. Immediately, the two figures appeared in a magnificent and majestic hall. "This is Tianqian Palace. I saw a man in mysterious robes standing directly above Tianqian Hall. There is a hint of loneliness and coldness in the tall back. This person is Qin Xian." As soon as the two appeared, they saw Qin Xian above them, and found that Qin Xian's aura was more powerful than before. Just by standing there, the void began to shake violently, as if the void was afraid of him. Seeing this, the two looked at each other, then lowered their heads, with respectful eyes, bent down and cupped their hands and said, "Master." Hearing the voice coming from behind, Qin Xian's deep eyes moved slightly, and there seemed to be vast stars flashing in his eyes. He glanced sideways at the two of them and said softly, "What do you need from me?" After the two of them listened, they told Qin Xian exactly what Chu Yale had just said. After a few breaths, Qin Xian turned around, with an interesting expression on his face. "So, the people in Tiangong can't bear it anymore. If nothing else, the person who attacks your second palace should be a strong man who has reached the martial emperor level." At this point, Qin Xian praised the two of them. "You have done a good job in this matter, and you two palaces will not have to worry about it from now on. If you encounter the same thing next time, just report back to me." Then he hesitated for a moment, seemed to feel something was wrong, looked at the two of them and said, "I will send Chu Yu to solve the matter. Of course, if there is any emergency, you, the second palace, will also try to cooperate as much as possible." After hearing this, the two of them nodded without hesitation. "But your strength also needs to be cultivated. The speed at which you improve your strength is really too slow. I gave you a lot of pills, but your strength is still at the peak of martial saint and half-emperor. This speed is a bit too slow." After Qin Xian finished speaking, he looked at them with a hint of disappointment in his eyes. When the two of them saw this, their bodies trembled, as if they sensed some kind of crisis. He hurriedly replied, "Master, please believe us. After the Soul Palace and the Shadow Palace are stabilized, the two of us will definitely speed up our cultivation progress and will not affect your plan, Master." But Qin Xian just nodded expressionlessly, without saying anything, and then waved. A voice resounded in their minds. "Back off." Seeing this, the two of them did not dare to say anything. They bowed and stepped back respectfully. The next moment, their figures disappeared into Tianxian Palace. Seeing the two disappearing figures, Qin Xian's eyes began to turn cold, with a bit of murderous intent in his eyes. Secretly sternly said, "Although the strength of Tiangong is not something I can fight against now, it does not mean that I have no power to resist." The words have fallen. Qin Xian directly spent a lot of mission points to replace two strong men who were at the low level of the martial emperor. These two martial emperors consumed all the mission value that he had worked hard to save for more than 10 days. After all, he originally wanted to save up for a strong mid-level martial emperor, but because of this, he ran out of time and could only replace two low-level martial emperors. Tiangong sent strong men to sneak attack on the forces below him, and he had to send other strong men to help, otherwise the disciples trained by them in the second hall would suffer heavy casualties. This is not what Qin Xian wants to see. But then he showed a look of doubt. Qin Xian didn't know how the White Palace knew that the Second Palace was the power of Profound Heaven Sect. Is it possible that Tiangong still has disciples hidden in my Profound Heaven Sect? Qin Xian murmured to himself. But he rejected it instantly. He shook his head and said, "Impossible. If other forces join my sect, the system will definitely remind me and issue a warning. But now the system has not reminded me, which means that no other forces have joined my sect." Having said this, Qin Xian looked outside and said after a long silence, "It seems that this Tiangong has something I don't know about." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 146. A moment later, two mysterious figures appeared in the center of the hall. The two of them are handsome and wearing blue robes. He exudes everyone's style. He doesn't look like a strong martial emperor, but like a scholar who has been in the academy for a long time. Qin Xian couldn't help but smile, but quickly hid it. Looking at the cold faces of the two, Qin Xian said in a deep voice, "I will give you two a task. The sect family that controls other martial emperor forces in the central region must firmly control them." Understandable, Qin Xian looked at the two of them seriously. Hearing these words, the two of them looked at each other with stern eyes and showed a trace of determination on their faces. They nodded and cupped their hands and replied, "Guyu, Fang Ming is determined to complete this mission and will not let you down, Master." As soon as the words fell, the two figures turned into a trace of bubbles and disappeared into the hall. Seeing the two disappearing figures, Qin Xian's eyes began to fall into deep thought. A few days later, the two figures were seen constantly shuttled between the major forces in the central territory, and they checked many ancient martial emperor forces, but they did not invade these forces because they were difficult to control. These forces have a large number of strong martial saints, as well as the Protectors formation. No matter how strong they are, it will take time to break the Protectors formation. Until the two of them came to a place called Yongxiao Palace. Guyu and Fang Ming stood in front of the mountain. This place is surrounded by clouds and mist, and there are many mountains. Everywhere is filled with the scent of birds and flowers, and from time to time you can see a white-robed man named Flying with a sword passing by here. Everyone looked happy, and all the worries seemed invisible among them. Until they saw the two figures on the top of the mountain, they all showed a trace of confusion, as if they didn't understand who these two people were, and they had never seen them before. But without exception, everyone consciously did not go up to ask, but watched the scene from a distance. Because they have a feeling in the dark that as long as they get close to the two figures, their heads will be in different places. About half an hour later, a trembling old man, out of breath, walked over slowly. The two of them looked up. I found that the old man's whole body exuded the aura of dying, as if he would die in the next moment. But the two of them did not relax their vigilance, because in their eyes, although the old man was shaking as he walked, as if he would fall down the next moment, his back was very straight, like a long stick. Especially the old man's eyes. The eyes exude a faint golden light, but sometimes they are cloudy. It was the old man's eyes that made the two of them feel a sense of crisis, so they didn't let down their guard. Although the old man's eyes were cloudy, they could not hide the ferocity and viciousness in them. The two of them haven't noticed this yet. Because the old man hid it well. This also seems to mean that when the old man was young, he was a powerful man who conquered the world, and his ferocity and viciousness determined everything. I saw a smile on the wrinkled face of the old man. He looked at the two men and said, "I don't know what a big deal it is to have two powerful martial emperors come to my little Yungxiao palace," the old man asked. After hearing the question, the two of them looked at each other, and Guyu, who was on the left, said, "It's nothing important. The two of us are here to tell you something very important." The old man's heart trembled, and he felt a bad premonition, but he still said bravely, "I don't know what it is, can you tell me in detail?" Seeing this, Guyu showed a smile on his face and shouted, "That means from now on, all the disciples and elders of your Yungxiao palace must obey this emperor's orders. Whatever you say will be whatever you say. You cannot refuse anything issued by this emperor matter." Before he finished speaking, the old man's originally smiling face froze, and his eyes showed a trace of murderous intent. Just looking at each other made him feel like he was standing in a sea of blood from a corpse. Even the disciples who passed by here felt the pressure and pain coming to their faces. Because this kind of gaze points directly into the depths of a person's soul. Once you have seen it, you will never forget it. This can also be said to be a form of torture. However, this kind of soul-like attack was useless to the two of them. The two of them always kept a calm expression on this situation. It seemed that this kind of breath was no different to the two of them than blowing the wind. Until he became a little impatient, Fang Ming moved his body, stepped with his left foot, and boom! The breath was blown away, and the old man stepped back dozens of steps, and then spit out a large mouthful of blood. The old man's face showed a hint of paleness, and the laws he exuded were very weak, and could even be said to have been destroyed. But I am still gritting my teeth and persisting. Have you ever heard of the Soul Palace and the Shadow Palace? Guyu raised his eyes and looked at the old man. After hearing this, the old man's eyes froze, he adjusted his body, paused for a moment and then said, "Is it possible that you two are from the Soul Palace and the Silver Palace?" After hearing this, the two of them laughed and nodded. The expression was so disdainful. In this scene, the old man's eyes were blazing, and he seemed to have understood the intention of the two of them. There was a hint of sadness on his face, and he let out a long sigh. "It seems that I, Yungxiao Palace, will never be able to escape." "That's all," the old man shook his head, as if he had let go of something. His eyes regained their former majestic golden light. "I'm old now, and my strength is no longer what it used to be. I've heard about you, and I also know that this calamity may be in the fate of my Yungxiao Palace. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly." There was a hint of self-mockery in the corner of the old man's mouth. "Perhaps this era is no longer the era I used to have, and I have been eliminated." Having said this, the old man looked at the two of them again, "But you are not eliminated, because now is your era. An old man like me should hide in that coffin and never appear in the world." After finishing speaking, the old man bowed deeply to the two of them and said, "From now on, my Yungxiao Palace will be handed over to you two. I really hope that you two can treat our Yungxiao Palace well. After all, it is also my Yungxiao Palace, a lifetime of hard work, and the disciples inside are all grown up under my watch. I don't want them to be treated as cannon fodder and die because of something. After all, they are still children." The two of them looked at each other and smiled, and said softly, "Don't worry, I won't do anything to you in Yungxiao Palace. I've said before, you just need to follow my orders. For other things, you can do anything else as usual." They are still secretly in charge, as long as they don't prevent me from ordering you. But I won't ask you to be a dead soldier, because the task I received is to control all your forces and minds, and I won't go on a killing spree. You just need to calm down and do your own thing. The rest of the time just do it, don't think too much. Rebirth of Fantasy, obtain the Sect system. Author, Red General. Chapter 147. Hearing this, the old man felt relieved and no longer had that worried look. I couldn't help but exhale slowly, looked at the two of them again, smiled and said, "Thank you both very much." Seeing the old man's polite expression, the two nodded and smiled in return. After all, this was the first time they met such a polite person, although there was also a reason for his strength. But none of this matters. Although the two were summoned, they are still human beings. When they meet polite people, they will naturally speak nicely. If they meet someone who is arrogant, domineering and arrogant, they will naturally use their strength to teach them. He is a good person. Haha, okay, don't worry, as I said before, obey all our orders. Guyu waved his hand. Then he looked at the old man and asked, "By the way, as the person in charge of the entire Yungxiao Palace, shouldn't you introduce to us how many powerful people there are in the Yungxiao Palace?" Guyu's words made the old man blush, with a hint of embarrassment on his face. Ahem. After coughing a few times, he looked at the two of them and said, "I was negligent. I'm really sorry." Then the old man began to explain the powerful people in Yungxiao Palace to the two of them, and it took half a stick of incense to finish. Fang Ming stood quietly, looking at the old man with a calm expression, and said, "In that case, your Yungxiao Palace also has 5.5 Emperor-level experts, and there are as many as 20 Martial Saint experts. If so, why does your Yungxiao Palace only have this little power? Is it possible that you encountered something in Yungxiao Palace? Or was it targeted by other forces?" Fang Ming really didn't understand, and this was also where he was confused. Hearing this sentence, it seemed that it touched the pain in the old man's heart, and he sighed helplessly. "Alas, you two don't know. If you want to survive among a first-class force like ours, you must have a strong man like the Martial Emperor to guard you. Although I have reached the realm of Martial Emperor, I cannot display the true strength of a strong Martial Emperor because I am older and no longer the same as before. When I was young, I often fought with those group of Martial Emperors of the same level, and also challenged those group of proud men. It is precisely because of this that I suffered too much wear and tear, too many internal injuries. Even if I rest for 1,000 years, I have consumed countless spirit pills. The elixir and spirit treasure can only recover about 70%. And I fought against too many forces back then and offended them." Having said this, he let out a long sigh. Looking into the distance, his cloudy eyes revealed a hint of loneliness. The body couldn't help but stoop. "The current Yungxiao Palace is like this because of me. The young, frivolous, and arrogant people back then also received retribution in the past few years. The enemies I offended before started to put pressure on Yungxiao Palace while I was recovering from my injuries. Since there was no powerful martial emperor in charge, most of the disciples in Yungxiao Palace died. In the end, I had to use treasures to barely repel them. I felt it too at that time, so I had no choice but to break through and get out. Although I used all my strength to barely repel them, my old injuries began to relapse due to the forceful use of strength, so I had no choice but to go into seclusion again. It took a year of seclusion before I could wake up. And on the day I woke up, those forces were ready to move again and started to attack the Yungxiao section. Even the powerful martial emperors guarding the sect began to appear. When I saw this scene, I naturally would not be afraid and rushed forward to follow. They had a great battle, and the final result was that I barely defeated them by relying on my own level. They also began to slowly accumulate strength because they were afraid of me, and they stopped attacking my Yungxiao Palace. but my old injuries started to come back again because of that battle. I started seclusion again, and I didn't wake up until the past few days. At this point, the two of them found that the old man's figure began to exude an aura of loneliness, with a little sadness in it. The meaning seems to be that the strong man back then is dead. The two did not speak and fell into a long silence. It wasn't until after a cup of tea that the old man turned around and looked at the two of them and said, "A first-class force like ours must be guarded by a strong martial emperor. If not, it will be annexed by other forces. This is eternal. According to the rules, if you two don't come here today, maybe I will disappear from this world with Yungxiao Palace in a few days. Why not cultivate a second strong martial emperor? Logically speaking, your Yungxiao Palace is so big, and you have a senior martial emperor, it is impossible that you cannot cultivate a second martial emperor," Guyu asked puzzledly. Road. Hearing Guyu's inquiry, the old man shook his head and said helplessly, "Martial emperor is not that easy to cultivate. It requires extremely high talent. Besides, I can't meet anyone with such talent. Because people with this level of talent are usually taken over by top forces like Tiangong and the others. How can I get my turn? It's already quite good to barely cultivate a few half-emperors." After listening, the two of them didn't say anything else. The fact is, as the old man said, genius is very difficult to find, and the probability is the same as if you win a lottery of 10 million. Once such a genius is born, he will be taken over by top forces such as Tiangong, and there will be no chance for top forces like him. If you want to become the top strength, you need at least one martial emperor peak powerhouse, or two martial emperor high-level powerhouses. But how difficult is it to become a high-level martial emperor? Just a small realm of martial emperor is too difficult for many geniuses to reach, and it is extremely difficult to break through. Only those with strong understanding cannot break through. As soon as he finished speaking, Guyu's face revealed a hint of disdain. I didn't think how these forces performed. A strong man with the martial emperor would show a look of fear when he was in charge. Facing the battle, he will only be excited, not afraid. Fang Ming, who was sitting next to him, saw this scene and didn't say anything. In his eyes, his thoughts were the same as Guyu's. Then he looked at the old man and asked, "What are these forces called?" Hearing this, the old man looked grateful and replied respectfully, "They are Sword Pavilion and Huang Tianmen respectively. As for those other forces that are nothing more than ants, I will destroy them immediately, so there is no need to worry too much. Only these two sects are the most threatening to us. Each of them is guarded by a strong martial emperor. They are also my descendants. Unfortunately, I am old. If I were young, how could they fight with me?" Having said this, the old man's face still showed a hint of disbelief. When the two saw this scene, they couldn't help but chuckle and said, "What are the levels of the strong martial emperors of these two forces?" Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 148. The old man quickly replied, "One is the low-level late-stage martial emperor, his name is Chu Tian, and the other is the peak low-level martial emperor, named Zhu Shenlong. As far as I know, this Zhu Shenlong is about to attack. Rank martial emperor, the time should be around these days." Hearing this, the two nodded slightly. "It seems that we have to solve it quickly. Our strength is only the peak of the low-level martial emperor. If this person breaks through to the middle level, it will still be difficult for us to deal with him," Guyu murmured. Then he looked at the old man and said, "Tell me where these two forces are located. In order to avoid any worries, Fang Ming and I will go and deal with them personally." The old man nodded, and then told the two of them where the two major forces were. Then Fang Ming gave the old man some important instructions, and then went with Fang Ming to where the two major forces were. A place full of ultimate sword intent. I saw 3 giant peaks reaching the sky standing here, showing the word pin. Everywhere in the middle of the mountain is filled with boundless evil energy. If there are people with weak willpower here, they may become crazy. And there are thousands of swords buried in it. Some are broken, some are stained with rust, and some are broken, but without exception, these sword blades are full of monstrous killing intent, and they are almost ready to take shape. Even the nearby void couldn't bear the sword intent, and there were bursts of harsh clicking sounds. This also seems to indicate that the owner who held them during his lifetime was a god who blocks the killing of gods, and the Buddha blocks the killing of Buddhas and gods. And it's at the top of all the broken swords. A red sword with bursts of white light was stuck in the ground. The sword intent emitted by the sword is very strange. It does not exude bloodthirsty killing intent like other swords, but emits the aura of space. If there were a swordsman genius here, he would definitely exclaim. Because this sword that emits white light is the legendary sky-breaking sword. It has no rank and is rumored to have surpassed the emperor rank. This sword is the personal sword of the great emperor. The reason why the sky-breaking sword has the aura of space law is because the sky-breaking great emperor tens of thousands of years ago used the power of his own laws and took 10 years to forge it. The great emperor of breaking the sky specializes in the laws of space and also practices swordsmanship. His own strength was also invincible at the same level at that time. He challenged all martial emperors with the breaking of the sky sword and never lost. Until the end, when he took the shattering void sky and stepped into the upper world, the sword was useless to him, so he finally left it in the profound heaven continent as a souvenir. Therefore, there is also a sentence that has reached the ears of everyone in the world. Those who get the sky-breaking sword will have the martial emperor at their fingertips. This means that if you obtain the sky-breaking sword, you can become a martial emperor at a minimum, regardless of your previous talents. But this sentence also has loopholes. Obtaining the sky-breaking sword is very simple, but you also have to accept the recognition of the sky-breaking sword. Otherwise, even if you get it, it will only be like an ordinary sword and will not release the breath of law. Finally, after tens of thousands of years of wandering, the sky-breaking sword was obtained by the founder of Sword Pavilion. But it is a pity that he did not control the sky-breaking sword, and the sky-breaking sword did not recognize him. In the end, he had no choice but to put the sword here and wait for the destined person to control him. And he also made harsh words. Whoever has the ability to be recognized by the sky-breaking sword can become the next master of the Sword Pavilion. Regardless of his previous identity and realm qualifications, all elders and disciples of the Sword Pavilion must accept it, otherwise they will be wiped out. To be reduced to a slave. In addition to this sword, the sword next to it is not inferior to the sky-breaking sword. There is only a slight difference between the two, because it does not leak the breath of law, only the wild and boundless killing intent. This place is called the Sword Tomb. It is the place where the elders of the Sword Pavilion have hidden their swords. It is also the place that all sword practitioners in profound heaven continent miss. Countless swords are stored here. The lowest rank among them is Earth rank. Say it. I saw a giant peak reaching the sky in the middle. There were countless pavilions here. From time to time, a famous disciple would fly with a sword in the air. They all wore yellow robes and had a big sword written on their chests. This also means that their identity is Sword Pavilion disciples. I saw a woman with a beautiful face and a graceful figure practicing swordsmanship on the cliff that was filled with strong winds. She was wearing a cyan Huayun robe, and her beautiful long hair was slowly flying as she practiced her sword. Click. Swish. The sword energy that the woman practiced rippled across the world like water waves, and there was a sharp sword sound all the time. This kind of sword energy is not extreme, but gives people the feeling of stepping into death, as if you move your body for a moment, you will be quietly cut into pieces by thousands of sword energy. And this woman is one of the 3 immortals of Sword Pavilion, named Shui Ruyu. His own strength has reached the peak of half-emperor, and he once withstood the attack of a strong martial emperor by himself, which is rumored by the world. Outsiders are called the Misty Sword Fairy. Rumor has it that as soon as she takes action, the earth will be shaken and the rain will fall. Looking at the void nearby that was cut by herself, Shui Ruyu's expression remained unchanged. She had seen this situation many times and couldn't help but shake her head. His bright eyes were slightly disappointed. He put away the sword in his hand and murmured, "It is really difficult to break through the Emperor Realm martial arts world. I have been practicing here for 8 years. I practice sword here every day when I have free time. But why can't I find any sense of breakthrough? Is it possible that my talent will stop here?" There was a trace of sadness on Shui Ruyu's face. Her white and tender little hands were clasped tightly, a hint of loneliness flashed through her eyes, and she couldn't help but sigh. After a while, then a young man in a robe walked here, with a little respect on his face. Hearing the footsteps coming from behind, Shui Ruyu frowned slightly. She had given orders, and no one could step in here without her orders. A trace of anger flashed across Shui Ruyu's face, and she looked behind her with furrowed brows, realizing that the person coming was actually her direct disciple. His expression immediately changed and turned into a smile. "Lian'er, how did you find yourself here?" When the young man heard this, he touched his head and said with a smile, "Master, am I not about to break through the martial sovereign realm? But I have recently felt that my swordsmanship has begun to stagnate. This situation it made me very worried, so I wanted to come to you and ask." Oh, the peach-like red lips were slightly raised, as if they felt something interesting. "You haven't come to see me, Master, for several months. Now when you encounter a bottleneck, you think of Master. What do you think of Master? Or do you hate me, Master?" Shui Ruyu looked at the young man with a hint of resentment in his eyes. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 149. Hearing these words, the young man glanced at Shui Ruyu carefully. His throat squirmed, he swallowed, and he didn't know what to say. He stood there blankly, his head slightly lowered, as if he was thinking about how to answer. Seeing the dazed look on the young man's face, her beautiful eyes turned slightly, and she walked in front of him, revealing her crystal-clear skin. If there were other Sword Pavilion disciples and elders here, they would be shocked, because they have never seen Shui Ruyu look like this. In their eyes, Shui Ruyu is a very cold-looking person. When others ask her questions, she rarely answers. Unless it is a big deal, she will say a few words casually. Smelling the fragrance that belonged to his master, the young man raised his head slightly and found that his watery face had a hint of charm. This feeling made his neck start to turn red. He just raised his head. It went down again. Seeing this scene, Shui Ruyu chuckled. The laughter is as beautiful as a newly blooming snow lotus. Shui Ruyu leaned down and whispered in his ear, "What's wrong? Why don't you dare to look at my master in the eyes, and you still show a trace of shyness? Is it possible that you will look like this when you see my master?" Shui Ruyu Jiao said. At this moment, her unique charm is released infinitely. Feeling the hot wind blowing slightly by his ears, the young man's heart trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but feel a little impatient, but he still restrained himself firmly and gritted his teeth. Then he sighed secretly, showing a hint of helplessness. In fact, there are other reasons why young men dare not look at water like fish. In the eyes of the young man, he felt that his master was too proactive, not like a woman at all, but like a brother. Whenever a young man comes to ask for advice from Shui Ruyu, she will show this kind of charm. Her sexy eyes and tempting cherry mouth seem to want to eat her. This always feels really exciting. He was scared and a little uncomfortable. He really likes his master. Whenever Shui Ruyu leaned close to him and made that sexy and charming look, his heart would start to flutter, and even disgusting thoughts would arise. But they were all suppressed by him and were not invaded by his own desires. Because he could not get over the hurdle in his heart from beginning to end. He has a principle, which is the bottom line of this principle that firmly restricts him and prevents him from doing such nondescript things. Therefore, he will not have too much contact with Shui Ryu unless he encounters some bottlenecks and troubles, and he is afraid that he will not be able to control himself. Thinking of this, the young man clenched his fists tightly, as if he had made some determination. He raised his head and looked at Shui Ryu with firm eyes. Shui Ryu was frightened by the young man's actions. Her delicate body took half a step back, with a trace of hesitation in her eyes, as if she was deciding something. But the young man's answer disappointed her. "Master, disciple, I beg you, can you not show this look every time? Whenever you act like this, I will be afraid, and even wonder if you are a vixen. Not only are you proactive, but you are also very coquettish." After the young man said this, he immediately shut up. When Shui Ryu heard this, his expression paused and his eyes widened. The next moment, his face showed a hint of redness. He looked at the young man with his mouth pursed, as if he didn't understand why he said this. After a few breaths, I saw that the young man did not speak. His expression showed a trace of anger, but also revealed a trace of charm. This expression made the young man feel that his master was like an angry kitten. It did not scare him, but instead aroused a strong desire for protection in his heart. Shui Ryu rushed forward, slapped the young man on the head hard, and shouted softly, "Who do you think the master is? You can praise the master for being ugly, but how can you say that the master is ugly? What about a vixen? Can a vixen compare to master?" Shui Ryu put her hands on her slender waist, and when she spoke, she actually revealed a trace of a little woman's posture from behind. But when the young man saw this scene, he didn't say anything and just stood there quietly. Shui Ryu helplessly covered his forehead and said, "You are a little boy who is too thoughtful. Master is seducing you. Why is master seducing you? Could it be that master has some disgusting thoughts about you? You know, master is 5,000 years old this year, and how old are you now? 18. At your age, how could master come to seduce you? Could it be that the achievement is to satisfy the emptiness in your heart, Shui Ryu snorted coldly. After hearing these words, the young man's eyes sunk slightly, the light in his eyes began to disappear, and he himself fell into a long silence. He even began to wonder if he was too narcissistic. Seeing that the young man didn't reply to her words, Shui Ryu couldn't help but puffed up her mouth again, looking very cute. "Look at you and you don't answer master's words. I think I should let you go out and experience what cruelty is. You must know that there is no one like master outside who cares about you." Hearing this, the young man's heart trembled, and his face showed a panicked look. He dared not speak, and quickly waved his hands and said, "Master, master, I have not failed to reply to your words. Please don't punish me for this matter. Get out. The situation outside is not good now. I heard that the two forces, Soul Palace and Shadow Palace, are arresting people everywhere. All major forces have issued a no-kill order against him. Everyone who encounters the second palace will be killed. Don't let the disciple go out for training at this time. The disciple is still young and doesn't want to die so early," the young man said in a panic, with even a trace of sweat showing on his forehead. Seeing this scene, Shui Ryu felt very satisfied. It seemed to satisfy his inner feeling. He smiled and said, "Of course it won't happen. If you die, as the master, I will feel very sad. You know, master, I risked my own life to rescue you from the powerful martial emperor. If you died, wouldn't everything master did back then be in vain?" When the young man heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Now, he was a little afraid of his master. Seeing the young man's panic and nervous movements, Shui Ryu was too lazy to continue scaring him. He waved his hand and said, "Okay, Okay. Master, I won't tease you anymore. Then his face became serious, and the conversation turned to what he had asked before. By the way, didn't you just say that you encountered a bottleneck? Now tell me first and let me come and see what the reason is. Rebirth of Fantasy, Obtain the Sect System. Author, Red General. Chapter 150. Seeing that his master finally started to answer his previous words seriously with a serious look on his face, the young man nodded heavily and showed a bright smile. He didn't want Shui Ryu to look like that again. He was really scared and afraid that he wouldn't be able to bear it. Afterwards, the two began a discussion that lasted half an hour. It means that your swordsmanship is very stiff and not as graceful as my master's. Is that what you mean? Shui Ryu asked with a frown. That's right, the young man nodded. He didn't understand what was going on. He obviously learned his swordsmanship from his master, but he felt that his swordsmanship was very stiff and its lethality was very low. I can't get over the feeling of being full of murderous intent like water is like a fish. Shui Ryu pondered for a moment and looked at the cranes in the distance with white clouds and blue sky. She had also encountered this situation back then. At that time, her cultivation level was almost the same as that of her disciples. After a moment, he said, Master has encountered your situation before, but I can only give you a suggestion, but it won't help you much. Because you can only rely on your own willpower to solve a situation like this, there is no other way. Hearing this, the man looked a little lonely. He thought his master could do anything, but in the end he still had to rely on himself. Looking at Shui Ryu, he nodded and said, Master, what should I do? But Shui Ryu didn't answer his sentence. I think it's better for you to go out and practice. Ah! The young man who heard these words looked shocked and said with a sad face, Master, I don't want to go out. It's too dangerous outside. What if my disciple's life is lost? His expression was extremely pitiful. Seeing this, Shui Ryu covered his mouth and smiled softly, my master only gives you two choices. First, go out and practice, and second, challenge Shenmenjiao, the direct disciple of the master of the sword pavilion. Before the young man could speak, Shui Ryu said again, why is it him? Because this man's swordsmanship is extremely superb, without any sloppiness. My teacher also observed him carefully and found that Shenmenju had not used his swordsmanship before. He will have a strong evil spirit surrounding him. This evil spirit is also called sword energy. Everyone has his own sword energy, and what he has developed is the sword energy that he has accumulated from thousands of corpses. This kind of sword energy is of extremely high quality. If you are not careful, the evil energy will enter your body and be firmly controlled by it, turning you into a sword demon who knows how to kill people. But he firmly controls and uses it. The credit goes to himself and his physique. His physique is very special. It is a blood demon sword body. It is this Dao body that prevents him from being controlled by those sword intents that are full of blood and murderous intent and have evil aura. The pavilion master was very lucky to choose him as his apprentice back then. If you want to break through that bottleneck, you must find him, because no one else in Sword Pavilion can suit you except him. After hearing this, the young man's eyes fell into hesitation. He knew that Shenmenju also knew that his terrifying talent and strength were not something that he could resist now. But his master said that he was the only one who could break through that bottleneck, so there was nothing he could do. After hesitating for a few moments, he nodded in agreement. I have no idea of going out to practice. Although he is talented and endures hardships, he also has a character flaw, that is, he is more afraid of death. Especially what the Shadow Palace and Soul Palace have done these days. Every time he heard the disciples in the sect talk about their terror, he would tremble uncontrollably and be afraid, so he didn't dare to go out to practice at all. In fact, Shui Ryu gave him a choice because he wanted to test the young man. She does not want her disciple to be a person who is afraid of death, because even if such a person eventually becomes a top powerhouse, it will have no effect on the girl's next level. Besides, a person who is afraid of death cannot become a top powerhouse. If you want to become a top powerhouse, you must break through yourself and cannot be afraid of death. Seeing that the young man had made his choice, Shui Ryu said softly, "You have to think clearly. The eldest disciple of the pavilion master, Shen Menju, has reached the point where he can do whatever he wants with his swordsmanship. If you try to find him to break through the bottleneck, you will be beaten. Yes, even death. I have also understood Shen Menju's habits. Once he fights, he will not show any mercy. Instead, he will kill you as soon as he comes up. He will not care who is behind you or what his background is. Are you sure you thought it through?" At first, the young man was a little scared when he heard the word death, so he looked hesitant. Then he thought about it and felt that Shen Menju would not kill him. After all, his talent was so strong, wouldn't it be a pity to kill him? I believe even the pavilion master will feel this way. As for what Shui Ryu said just now, he didn't take it to heart at all, because she felt that the master was scaring her, and she must go out and practice by herself. Then his eyes became firm, looking at the water like a fish. He patted his chest and said confidently, "Don't worry, master, I won't lose to him. If you want to break through the bottleneck, why be afraid of death?" Shui Ruer didn't speak. She knew that the young man didn't take what she said earlier to heart, so she sighed. A pair of beautiful eyes looked at the 10,000-foot mountain peak not far away. After a moment, he slowly said, "Since you are so determined, I don't need to persuade you as a teacher. Just do what you want. I can teach you, there are only so many." The young man looked at Shui Ryu's extremely beautiful face, nodded slightly, turned around and walked towards the sword pavilion, because he wanted to challenge Shen Menju in public. Feeling his disciple walking out, Shui Ryu came back to his senses. A trace of worry appeared on his face. He shook his head, sighed slightly, and his figure disappeared into thin air. "Say it." "I saw the sword pavilion thousands of miles above the sky. The place is shrouded in clouds and mist, exuding a hint of spiritual mist, just like a fairyland on earth. Suddenly a space crack opened here. Click, 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 click. Two figures with powerful auras and indifferent expressions stepped out of them. The aura emitted by itself made the sky unable to bear it, and it made a clicking sound. Even the nearby void began to shatter, revealing an endless space turbulence that could not be seen at a glance. These two people are Gu Yu and Fang Ming. I saw their eyes looking downward. Looking at this majestic sword pavilion, exuding the sword intent of the sky, Gu Yu's face showed a trace of disdain. Only Fang Ming, who was on the side, saw this scene with a solemn look in his eyes, as if he saw something threatening.